To Win. Thank you so much for joining me. As you can tell, I'm not in Las Vegas at the studios at the Wynn. This week, I'm doing it from home just because of some scheduling, but the content, as always, will be pretty epic because the race this weekend was totally amazing. To digest it and review it, I've actually got a very special young lady joining me, Chloe Chambers. She is part of the Mobil1 Academy. She is really making her name on the racing scene as one of the Haas junior drivers. So much to talk to her about. I really can't wait. Well, Spa, I don't know how you felt about it, but it was building up over the weekend exactly as I predicted. It was, the weather, that was a factor. Every step of the way, it was throwing curveballs at the drivers. Just seeing the way the track was changing. The last guy on track, literally for the last second in practice and qualifying, would get the fastest lap. It made it a very organic and very fluid situation. But of course, as you'd expect, the top guys, the cream, always rises to the top. It is one of those tracks on the calendar that is just such an epic for everyone involved. I used to go there with my dad for like the Spa 1,000 kilometers race. I raced there quite a few times, both in Vauxhall Lotus, which was a big series I did. At the same time, I had Alan Manish and Mika Hakkinen on the grid. So it was, it was a pretty cool part of my young racing career. And then when I was with the Viper program, we also raced there quite a bit. So just an epic track. And I can tell you, Eau Rouge is as tough as you imagine. Maybe more tough in a GT car when you've got all that weight moving around. We're definitely not flat. And those Formula One cars are flat out. Well, I'm going to dive into the race a bit more with Chloe, but George Russell won, but then didn't win because of that disqualification, a big DQ for him for being underweight. For me, and we should address it, it was one of the best drives I've seen in a long time. Just the way George was relentless in his pursuit of keeping hold of those tires to go for a one-stop strategy. I believe he called it from the car. Let's do it. I mean, he came in on lap 12 or something out of a 44-lap race, the longest racetrack on the Formula One calendar. And there he is, just keeping those lap times all the way to the end. Even when Lewis Hamilton caught him, and I thought it was going to be a little inevitable that Lewis, who was having as well an outrageous race, caught him up. I thought he was just going to go by. I mean, he had the DRS, but what George did, which I promise you is as tough as it looked, or tougher than it looked, he'd get the traction coming off the corners and just pull the gap back out to like 6-7 tenths of a second, even within DRS range. But DRS zones being shorter this weekend, it just didn't allow Lewis the time to go by. And I think, and you can see it on George's face, an epic drive and one for which he should have been rewarded. Blood, sweat, and tears, and all the champagne and all the joy. And then you go and get blown out at the end. And you may wonder, how does that happen? Well, the cars, the top three, the podium cars, all go into their part firme. You see them pull up at the 1, 2, 3 sign. Drivers go on to celebrations. But then the tech crew from Formula One really get and dive into the cars. And a big part of that was finding the car was about 1.5 kilos down. That's 3.5 pounds or something. How much is that, you might think? Well, not as much, but in racing terms, a lot. Would it have had any effect on his performance during the race? Maybe a tenth here and there, cumulatively adding up in a few seconds over the course of the 44 laps. But it was 100% unintentional. Formula One aren't saying it was intentional. It's just the rules are absolutely clear. If you're underweight, you get disqualified. How could it have happened? Well, maybe his one-stop strategy meant he took more rubber off the set of Pirellis that ran for 32 laps, and he literally was underweight. Maybe on the cool-down lap, you see the drivers driving off to the edge through all the marbles. The marbles are all the bits of rubbish and crap that's around the edge of the track. Look out for it next Grand Prix. You'll see them doing it. They're not doing that for any other reason apart from normally their crew chief reminds them it's to pick up extra weight on the tires so the car will definitely make the minimum weight. It's kind of a little sneaky trick, but everyone does it. No way to stop it. Which promoted Lewis Hamilton, who had an epic second place, but as you can see on the podium, was definitely not happy about it. He had given his heart and soul to his crusade to take the top spot, and he wins 2 races in a row. I mean, that's his 105th win. And I mean, it wasn't long, was it, last year? Everyone was going, oh, that guy's too old. I mean, he's past it. I mean, he may have won all those championships, but he's an old dog. No tricks, no new tricks. But he certainly pulled it off too. I would never thought I'd be sitting on this show this year saying Mercedes-Benz with Lewis Hamilton 2 wins in a row. Anyway, I'm sure the guys at Ferrari must be so excited. It's validating their wild decision to go with Lewis and drag him away from Mercedes. Lando Norris, he didn't have a great weekend. These are the things that are sticking in my claw, really. You know, we've seen him 5 times. He hasn't made off the front row, you know, and held on to it. And it was just a disaster for him once again off the front row. And he doesn't lead the first lap. He actually overtripped himself up, went wide. It was an overreaction, I think, to the cars in front of him. And he dropped so many places back when he went on the gravel. I mean, he didn't go on the gravel. He went out wide. And it really compromised his race from therein. And that was exaggerated, maybe the effects of that also by the immense performance of Oscar Piastri. Again, I'm going to use the word relentless. He just kept on coming up through every stage of the race. And at the end, his steady progression up to the back of Lewis Hamilton was like a panther stalking its prey in the wild. Interesting with Mercedes that I thought if he got any closer and Lewis was faster, they were going to have to let him go past George, because you just can't lose the overall for that, for team orders. But he didn't make it that close. But it was perhaps one of the factors in Lewis, you know, looking a little in his rear mirrors that meant he didn't go past George. But I mean, Oscar, I think we're seeing something right now come together. He's making less mistakes. Remember, he said a lot last year, I need to learn more about tire strategy. I need to learn more about how to manage my tires. And I think he's really got the grips with that right now. And he is emerging as one of the drivers that he's going to be a world champion, isn't he? But then I think Lando is too. So McLaren are going to win a couple of championships. But Oscar, I think, is the hot ticket right now. And Lando definitely, I mean, he's an emotional guy, a very bullish, young, emotional guy. I think the Iceman mantle that Oscar has may really swing favor in his direction. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? McLaren's, I mean, yeah, 2 top fastest cars at this moment. Again, who would have thought that? Well, Max didn't do what he's done the last 2 years at Spa and stomp his way to the front after just, starting somewhere back on the grid. He had that 10-place grid penalty and it dropped him back. But, you know, Max Verstappen is going to make such mincemeat of anyone in front of him, especially at the start. He gained 3 places. Lando lost 3 places, and they're kind of pretty much together on that first lap, which is the disaster for one and an unexpected Christmas present for Max. But it was a strong race from him. I do think that we're seeing the fallibility of the Red Bulls right now. They're not matching an outright pace, especially McLaren. But I do think that, and Mercedes in some ways, but you're seeing this ability of Max Verstappen to dig deep and just do some incredible stuff on track. Anyway, I thought he had a strong race, but just not an amazing one. But Checo Perez, on the other hand, Sergio is having, the drain is circling downwards. He's having the worst time he can possibly imagine. And to go from second on the grid to 8th, and Dr. Helmut Marko and Christian Horner are barely able to hold back their frustration in social media and in press conferences. It is inexcusable to do that. They need those points in order to win the manufacturer championship. And it's very, very anticipated that they have a meeting coming up right now, probably today as we speak, where they're going to make a decision on moving forward. Apparently, though, Will Buxton was saying this on his podcast, that Liam Lawson and Danny Ricciardo are going to have a shootout. They're not calling it a shootout, but when you put 2 drivers in identical car to go out on probably the same tires, same conditions, at the same track, it's actually a 2-year-old V car, but Imola, they are going to be battling it out to see if either one of them should take that seat moving forward. In Formula One, as I think we worked out by now, if something is sounding one way and the gossip's out there and it's like it's a little family, I talked about it with Will, everybody seems to know everything, then I think there's smoke, there's fire. So I think we're going to see a lot changing that. I'm not Ferrari. I don't know what to say. They were there. Charles Leclerc, I thought he was going to be more of a player in the race, but he ended up with a podium, didn't he? Inherited, but still lacking a bit of pace in the dry. But we'll see. We'll see what comes up after this summer break. Finally, the news we've been waiting for. When I was just doing my notes on the show last night, one of my things were, all indications are that Carlos Sainz will end up at Williams for 2025 and beyond. Well, guess what? It's happened. As I literally was about to start taping this, there it is on the front page of Formula One's website. Carlos Sainz has signed with Williams moving forward, and I think it's great. He's put out a video already. Check it out on his Instagram. He is committed. I think it's an interesting one. He's going to be partnering Alex Albon. I think it was one of those teams that has an epic place in Formula One history. Actually, you must buy Will Buxton's book to find out how truly great Williams were in the Damon Hill era. Ayrton Senna. They were one of the best under the mentorship, tutelage of Sir Frank Williams, who's sadly no longer with us. And the family sold the team, and I think they're on the way. They have huge financial backing, and they want to get to the top. Another team heading to the top, but Carlos, I'm sure the paycheck was pretty good too, and he's worth every penny. The final few places to still in that dance in the silly season of who's going to go where is obviously, does this mean Sauber will retain Valtteri Bottas? I think so. I think they should. He certainly deserves it. I love seeing him in Formula One, especially from the human side. And what will Alpine do to partner with Pierre Gasly? So we still have to wait and see what happens there. Of course, the big ones will put Mercedes in the Hamilton seat, and then what's happening with Red Bull. We know that Max is obviously going to be fine. We know Sergio isn't. What is going to happen in the Visa Cash App car? So still some dancing to be done, but Carlos Sainz locking in his seat, I think, is the first big step. And probably very nice to go on your yacht and enjoy yourself when you know what you're going to do. Ultimate Race Week at the Wynn Las Vegas is back, and just in time for you to make plans to attend the 2024 Heineken Las Vegas Grand Prix. The racing on the track last November was indeed electric, with a whopping 82 overtakes, and race fans that stay here at Wynn Las Vegas are treated to a best-in-class Formula One hospitality experience like no other. There are multiple packages, all with different price points, available for purchase now at winlasvegas.com. The Grand Fan Package covers 3 nights of accommodations here at Wynn Las Vegas, along with 2 F1 Grandstand tickets and access to exclusive special events and amenities. The Wynn Grid Club Package allows you to watch the race from the second floor of the paddock, right above pit lane. This ultra-exclusive hospitality suite features up-close views of turns 1 and 2 from a private outdoor terrace. It includes 5-star dining and beverages and a 3-night stay in either the Wynn or Encore Tower Suites. To make your Ultimate Race Week reservations today, head to winlasvegas.com. That's winlasvegas.com. Don't miss out, as last year was incredible, and this year promises to be even better. Chloe Chambers, well, we're going to get to her right now. 20 years old. She's racing in F1 Academy with the MoneyGram Haas Formula 1 team operated by Campus Racing. She's won 1 race, which she did just the other day, and 3 podiums. So she's rocking it right there in the top 3 on the championship table. Started karting at 8 years old, as all the top drivers seem to. In 2021, she was racing in the F4 US Championship and the W Series in 2022. And then in 2023, she raced in Formula Regional Oceania in New Zealand. I've also raced out there. It's a wonderful place to head, and became the first female pole sitter and winner in the series history. She also won 7 races in the Porsche Sprint Challenge North America. A side note, she also holds the Guinness World Record for the fastest vehicular slalom that she won with Porsche Cars North America in 2020. She was also on America's Got Talent Extreme in 2022 and went on David Letterman. So she is making moves. And she, that's my big question, the woman that will make it first into the Formula One grid? I can't wait to find out all about it. Chloe, welcome to Drive to Win. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I was really excited to talk to you because I know that Tom, my PR guy, that reached out to you, and we were going to do it a few weeks ago, and we couldn't do it, but because Zach Brown could come on, and I hate to bump you for Zach, but I had, but it's like I get bumped for, if you had the chance to go on a big podcast. But it was so good because then it meant I followed you, and obviously then you went and won in Barcelona. I mean, how good is that? I mean, what a way. You're right in the top 3 of the championship. Just talk about how you're feeling right now about the season.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's amazing to get these results so far this year. Getting my podium in Miami was really amazing because I started from a little bit further back in the grid than what I had hoped for. So being able to make up those spots and fight for the podium was really nice. And to get my first podium at home, of course, was amazing. And then to get my first win in Barcelona with my whole family there was super cool. They don't come to many races, so it was nice to have them there and be able to see, my first win and support me through it.
Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it? You got to remember, you could see Lewis Hamilton, you can see Max Verstappen, it doesn't matter, Lando, Oscar. Without the families, there's nothing. You guys can't race without your family's support. But when did that come from? Is your dad into it? Is your mum into it? Because I know you have a couple of sisters. I mean, Fort Wayne, Indiana isn't the hotbed of motorsports generally, is it?
No, so my dad was always a big motorsport fan, grew up in the UK, so I guess it's a little bit more mainstream there than it is in the US, or at least it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So I just grew up watching mainly Formula One, but kind of racing of all sorts on television. And naturally, I had an interest in it. My dad did some autocrossing and that kind of thing. Never actually raced himself, but was always, interested and would love to have raced if given the opportunity, but, you know, um, I guess he kind of was able to live that dream of his through me a little bit when I asked if I could go drive. I didn't really know about go-karting so much. I just asked if I could drive, and, of course, he was super excited to hear me ask that, and then, yeah, I went and started racing at 8 years old in, karting. I lived in New York at the time, so I started off racing in the Northeast and then continued on karting, throughout the US and Canada.
Which means you must be good in the wet. You must have had so many wet kart races.
In karting, the wet was always a little bit more difficult because it's a lot more based on the driver weight, and I'm not a very big driver, so especially back then, I was tiny, so I would struggle a lot in the wet, but in a car, I'm a lot better.
Yeah, well, your weight in a car is really going to be, as your career evolves, it has to be an advantage. I mean, I know, all us fat guys when we drive against lighter people in carts go, in the drive, oh, we would have won if it wasn't for our, our weight. But in cars, that's sort of taken away. Other than the fact that I think a pound is a horsepower or something, in a formula car. So you definitely got that going for you. I was also thinking, I mean, I was going to ask this later, but the physicality of racing, has that surprised you as you've gone up? I mean, you have to be strong now, don't you, to drive one of these cars?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very physical car to be driving. F1 Academy is an F4 car basically, so it's on the kind of beginner part of the Formula 1 ladder. So, of course, the car is a little bit lighter, you have skinnier tires, of course, you don't have all the downforce that Formula 1 cars have. So, for us, our cars are, I guess, in a way, a little bit less physical than maybe some of the other cars as you kind of move up the ladder a little bit, but still, there's no power steering in the cars, so you still have to really work on that. And then, of course, your neck strength is going to matter in any car you drive, GT car, Formula car, anything. So, kind of as you progress up the ladder, that always becomes a factor, and it becomes to be more and more of a factor. You can see some of the Formula One drivers at the beginning of the season, they'll say how hard it is for those first few races before they get reacclimated to it. So, yeah, it's definitely a very physical sport, and I think that's something that not many people realize.
Yeah, they really don't. I mean, how many times have you had people say to you already in your short career, well, it's not a sport. You're not an athlete. I mean, how tough is it? I'm like, oh, you should try doing Le Mans for 3 hours in the heat
Yeah, yeah.
in a Dodge Viper when it was 160 degrees in the car. I will argue that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in sports cars and endurance racing, you have the heat as a big factor because you don't have all the airflow that you get in open wheel cars. And then in open wheel cars, except for Formula One, there's no power steering and everything else. So it's yeah, it's it's quite a sport. And even karting too is, super, super physical.
Obviously, I had my own career, and I remember the key moments where I it was the door opened and I could see the next level of the game, if you like, unfolding to me. Talk to me about you getting into the under the umbrella of Haas and get in, and obviously into the F1 Academy. But what was that moment like, and how did that come about? Because the competition must be like jacked trying to get one of those seats.
Yeah, so there's only 15 seats in F1 Academy, so it's not many. There's 20 seats in Formula One, but 15 in F1 Academy, so it's even less than what you would get in Formula One. Of course, the pool of drivers coming in is a little bit smaller as well, but there's still so much competition for the seats. So what I ended up doing is actually in 2023, I took a little bit of a step away from open wheel racing and did some Porsche Sprint Challenge racing.
Successfully, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, very
Yeah, yeah.
successfully. So it wasn't a bad year at all. Any time in a car is a good learning experience, whether it's an open wheel car, sports car, whatever it may be. So it was a nice year for me. I got to be home a lot more and kind of regroup. And then in December, I really kind of was putting my full focus into getting a spot in F1 Academy. And I signed with A14 Management in December, and they were a big part in helping me get the seat in F1 Academy through their connections. Of course, growing up in America, driving in America, it's a lot more difficult to kind of break into the European circle. So A14's been a really big help with that. And then my sponsor, who has been with me since 2021, Monoflow International, has been really supportive in getting me to where I am now. And I'm happy to kind of be able to continue on with their support on the European side of racing this year. And so yeah, I mean, it was a big process to get the seat, but I was really happy to get it. It made a lot of sense for me to go with Haas. Haas is the only American team, so um, I'm happy to kind of fly the flag for both of us at all of the races all around the world.
Yeah, let's talk about that Formula One weekend. I back in the day, I did a thing called Vauxhall Lotus, and you go to it was Mika Hakkinen and all these amazing drivers too. But we being the support race at an F1 event it isn't what people think. It's not like you're hanging out. Well, we weren't like hanging out with the Formula One drivers. We were in that paddock, which you kind of see the other side of the edge of nowhere, and your track time is limited, right, by how the Formula One races go. If they get delayed, you get delayed. I mean, you're definitely, the undercard, but you're on the card. The experience, though, of racing at a Formula One event, all those fans who are there for Formula One, but the minute you go on track, you are the center of attention. A little bit of big game day nerves, I imagine, as well. You're pulling onto the track with 250,000 people watching. You're not at Mid Ohio in the rain on your own. So, talk about the Formula One weekend experience so far.
Well, my first Formula One race that I ever attended in person was a race that I was racing in myself. So I actually never ended up going to a Formula One race and being able to watch the full race in its entirety until this year. So I raced in W Series in 2022, which also was on the Formula One support bill. So I got to go to all these different races all over the world, but never really had the time to actually watch Formula One. I was always, of course, a little bit more worried about myself
Yeah.
first. um, but this year, it's been really nice being able to kind of have that affiliation with the MoneyGram Haas F1 team and be able to see a little bit more on what goes on behind the scenes. I went to Silverstone, which is a race that I wasn't racing in, so I got to spend that entire week just, having a look around, being able to talk to all the engineers, being able to talk to the drivers, and just kind of, getting that experience.
So quite, yeah, it is. It's just such a different world. I mean, crazy. Well, let's talk about Spa this weekend. I'm sure you watched the race. Uh, how do you feel for George Russell? I mean, he deserved that win, didn't he? One stop. You and
Yeah.
I know what it means to drive on those tires. I mean, I thought it was a sublime drive. And
Yeah.
tell me your thoughts on the race.
Yeah, I mean, of course, getting a win in a Formula One race is amazing. And, you have the super duper high feeling after the race of, the exhilaration of winning, and especially doing a drive like that where you're doing a one stop strategy and it was able to work in the end. You feel super great after the race. You're celebrating, you go through the podium ceremonies, all the interviews, and then to kind of, have that disqualification afterwards is a real shame. Of course, you got to feel for the guy.
You got to feel
um
for the guy. What did you think? I tell you what, I mentioned it at the top of the show. I just thought he was catching him like 7/10 of a second, Chloe, a lap. And I'm like, he's going to go by. There's no way with DRS. But then, do you think Piastri coming up behind started filling Lewis's mirrors a little bit? Because he didn't get any closer than that. And then I could not believe on those old tires, the traction that, that George was getting off every corner. And that's all he needed to do. I mean, do you look at that and go, that's a lesson to be learned? I mean, he just focused. I don't think George even looked in his mirrors anymore. I think he just focused. What do you take away from watching a performance like that?
Yeah, I mean, from watching the Formula One races, there's always lessons to be learned, and especially from a race as unique as Spa was, there's definitely things to kind of look out for. Like you said, how he was able to kind of, just keep driving forward and get good exits off the corners. That's something that, of course, any driver I think can take into their own careers. As for myself, someone who's been leading a race before and has been under pressure from behind, I always try to make sure that, I try to minimize the risk of being overtaken in the places where it's most likely to happen. And I think that's what Russell was able to do really well. And, I think that's a really nice lesson for a lot of drivers to learn regardless of what kind of racing you're in.
Yeah, it is so. I actually was on pole in the first Formula Ford race I was on pole for. I suddenly realized as I was starting the first lap, I'd never led a race before. And so I just looked in my mirrors everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And as you say, they can't overtake you by 3 seconds down a straight, can they? And I'm sure your karting had to have helped you a lot with identifying the places to worry about. Yeah, that's a really good point. Obviously, you're with Haas, and they had a disastrous weekend, really. It wasn't great, 14th and 18th. But the last few races have been spectacular. Do you feel that energy coming from the organization as a whole when they get sixth place and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was in Silverstone for Hulkenberg's P6 finish. So, the just the atmosphere in the garage. Of course, for any other top team like a Red Bull or Mercedes or McLaren, a sixth place finish probably wouldn't be, something to celebrate. But for a team like Haas, where it's so rare for them to get those podium finishes and even this time get P6 well into the top 10, I think that, it's really a special moment for them. It's really nice to kind of see the teamwork behind it all. Of course, I don't get to spend a lot of time in the garages watching the sessions as they go on, watching the races. I get to have a headset so I can hear the radio messages and everything. So it's really cool to, just be able to experience all of that. Haas is so, so welcoming. I've had a lot of fun working with them and, being able to just get all of these new experiences.
Yeah, I really like them. I think their driver choice for next year's great. I mean, I think there's a lot of great plans coming from that. I I'm a big Kevin Magnussen fan just because I think he's such a bulldog. He's so tough to be on track with, and obviously he's not signed for next year. But when you look at the drivers in Formula One, what are the qualities that you see in a particular driver that you want to emulate, or is it a mix of all the drivers? Because you're driving. They're only a few years older than you, Chloe. They're not my age. They're not old men, right? They're just a couple of years older.
Yeah, I mean, of
Some
course,
of them.
growing up watching Formula One, initially when I was really young, kind of back when I can pretty much the earliest that I can remember from watching Formula One as a child, I always looked up to Lewis Hamilton. I thought that, his work ethic and just the positivity that he has was always something that I always kind of was wanting to emulate a little bit. Um, Kind of his humble beginnings, hit pretty close to home for us as a family, so it's nice to see somebody like that come into Formula One and be able to succeed as much as he has. And then, of course, Fernando with A14, I've been able to really learn some things from him, been able to speak to him, one-on-one, and he's such a good guy off the track. Of course, a great driver on track. He just has so much knowledge, is willing to help. He's just got so much experience that, of course, younger drivers such as myself and even some of the drivers in Formula One now, can for sure use, in their careers.
Yeah, I mean, Alonso he just defies logic. It's like Scott Dixon over here in IndyCar, right? I mean, he just keeps winning everything, and obviously Alonso isn't winning right now, but the way he digs deep, what he brings to the racecraft and everything, I'm really glad. When he talked to you, what did he say to you?
Yeah, I mean, he's said a few things to me at some of the races. So I remember I saw him at the Barcelona race, and um, that was the weekend where our second race had the possibility of having rain, possibly in the middle of the race or kind of right at the beginning of it. So, he told me a couple of little track tips for in the wet for Barcelona. And then, yeah, that was right after my P2 qualifying and my P3 finish in race one. So I was really, really trying to get the win in race two, and it didn't rain, but, yeah, I was able to win in the second race, and, I think maybe a little bit of that was from Fernando's aura or something.
Yeah, so that's wild. You're obviously in your bedroom at home, but you're a 20-year-old racing driver who has advice from Fernando Alonso. You got to get real. This is wild.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it's pretty neat to kind of have that connection and have his support and, of course, have him at my full disposal at the race weekends. It's just it's just cool, and my mom loves him too, so
Well, I like that. Whose mum doesn't love Fernando Alonso? That join the list. So when are you going to get in a Formula One car? How does this unfold? How does the rest of your book uh, read?
Well, of course, I would love to get into a Formula One car as soon as possible. Right now in F1 Academy with F4 spec cars, the next step, I mean, kind of logically, is F3, F2, F1.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's a lot more complex than what it seems. I did a test in the Formula 3 car a couple of weeks ago in Silverstone, so F3 and F2 are making steps and making it a little bit more accessible for not just women, but kind of just people of all different kind of backgrounds, sizes, anything to make it more accessible for the majority of people. So um, I think that there are really nice steps being taken into progressing females into F3 and F2. And I think with F1 Academy now as well, there will be more girls kind of starting out in karting as well. So, of course, getting into F3 and then F2 and then hopefully F1 in the future is the goal. But I've always said that my ultimate goal is to be racing in the pinnacle levels of motorsport, whether that's open wheel, endurance racing, sports cars. Of course, I would absolutely love to race in the Indy 500, being a Hoosier myself. And
Yeah.
then, of course, I would love to be racing in some of the big endurance races like Le Mans and Daytona, which is a big American race. So I'd love to race there. And I think just kind of being able to race at the pinnacle levels of motorsport and being able to be competitive and fight for wins is my ultimate goal.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you got that attitude because, like so many drivers, you have to have Formula One as the goal, Chloe, because that's the pinnacle. That is the top of the mountain. But Tom Christensen, 8-time Le Mans winner, 9-time Le Mans winner, he wanted to be a Formula One driver, but it didn't end up. So then he went to DTM. Then he is the most winningest sports car driver in history. Not a bad career, right?
Yeah.
It didn't end up too bad. Scott Dixon, he should have been in Formula One, didn't have that opportunity. I mean, Gilles de Ferran, there's so many people ahead of you that had incredible careers, and it wasn't just all about Formula One, but the discipline you're learning and the moment in time that you're at, this moment that's particularly aware and dedicated to making people in your position have a chance. I think that's, you're at the right moment. You're aware of that, aren't you? That 10
Yeah.
years ago, this was not an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. I always say I remember, showing up to the racetrack and back when I was karting and there would probably be like maybe two or three other girls on the track with me, if that. I remember I raced in 2019, which is only 5 years ago, I guess, but
Yeah.
even only 5 years ago, it wasn't so common to see girls at the kart track. I was in a race in Las Vegas called Supernats, which is one of the largest kart races in the world, and there were about 80 drivers in my class, and it was me and one other girl out of those 80 drivers. And I think, I never really noticed it when I was younger, kind of coming up. I never paid attention to other girls. I never really took a tally on how many there actually were. It didn't really matter to me, and I didn't actually realize that it did matter. So I just kind of went on my merry way. But, in hindsight, you kind of notice these things, and especially when there's such changes kind of happening in the world with F1 Academy, and then of course in other sports, it's now kind of like a little realization moment.
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited for you. I think it's definitely the right time. I remember um, Roger Penske and was talking about it, and then my dear friend Gilles de Ferran, who passed away early in the year, and Elio Castroneves would always talk about what makes a driver, what's the important thing, and it was funny. Gilles would always say, "You just have to win. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're in. Don't move up too fast in case you can win." It's so when you go and see it, anyone at Haas or they stand in the paddock, they want to say like they can now, "Oh, she won. She won in Barcelona." It's just such a difference, isn't it? Just having that title next to your name, I'm a winner.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at Kimi Antonelli. Everybody is praising him because he's won in literally everything that he's driven. And now, he's rumored to have a seat in Formula One next year.
Yeah,
And, it's all because he's just, I mean, not just won, but he's really, really dominated in almost everything.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Do you enjoy the physical training?
I
Yeah.
enjoy some aspects of it.
Okay.
So, of course, I came up through a swimming background, so I still love swimming. It's one of my favorite ways to train. I really enjoy cycling. And then, I have to do weight training. That's not my favorite part, but it's not terrible, like I'll get through it. I know I have to.
You
And
have
then,
to. Yeah,
it's kind of like doing schoolwork. You hate doing it, and then when you're done with it, you feel so good and you're
yeah,
so happy to kind of, have that little tick off the box. But I think, my favorite kind of forms of training are like pretty much anything except for running. Running, I think, is probably my least favorite by far.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely miserable. Well, I'm going to do a little thing now, which is some questions we ask, just fun, shorter answers. And I'm sorry if one of them you've already answered, but this is a different segment. It's time now, Chloe, for the Mobil1 Pit Stop for the love of driving. What do you think is your biggest quality as a young racing driver?
I think my competitiveness, just my will to win.
Which Formula One driver, I know the answer, do you look up to most as a role model?
I think right now, Fernando Alonso.
Okay. Do you feel in any way that you have a role as a role model yourself to younger women?
Oh, I think for sure, of course, with being only in the second season of F1 Academy, just at the beginning of the whole journey that we have going on here, of course, I think for sure we all serve as role models.
Do male drivers underestimate you on the road?
I think they used to, but I think as I've been able to kind of show myself a little bit more, then, I start to gain a little bit more respect.
Okay, I like that. Outside of racing a car, what is your secret skill no one's got to know about?
I can solve a Rubik's Cube.
Oh, okay, you win. That's very good. You're the only living person I know that does that. Very, very good. And what was the best advice you ever got about being a racing driver?
Best advice. I mean, there's a lot of advice that I've received in my career, but I think kind of some of the best advice that I've received is some of the advice that I've actually gotten from my dad, because he's been with me throughout the whole journey, really. Um, he's always kind of told me that, you know, the best way to carry yourself both on and off the track is with assertion, not necessarily aggression, because then, it's a fine line between being aggressive and then being too kind of meek. Especially as a woman too, you really need to assert yourself. Make your voice heard and speak up for yourself. Don't let other people speak for you. And I think that's something that, you can use both inside of the car, outside of the car, away from the track, kind of in any time in your life, really.
Sounds like a good dad.
Yeah, for
Very
sure.
good, Dad. Well, Chloe, thank you so much for being on the Mobil1 Pit Stop for the love of driving. Well, Chloe, the next race for you is Zandvoort. That is a festival, right? Have you been
Yeah.
there before? Have you raced at that track?
We had a test earlier on in the year just with the F1 Academy drivers in April. It rained the entire time and it was cold. So I'm hoping for a better experience this time.
Yeah, and the sand always kind of the wind blows that
Yeah.
sand across. I remember we raced there a bit and quite a bit, and it was so changing. The track was like a sea almost. It's wild.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. And then you're right next to the sea as well, so you get all of the weather that, the sea brings. So
Well, I'm excited for you. What's your dad's name, by the way? We should give him a shout out.
Matt.
Matt. All right, Matt Chambers. Okay, well, he's responsible for who you are right now, which is a great thing. Well, listen, we're so excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much, and we're going to follow your career. And as you go up through the ranks, just keep your foot on it. And people do business with people they like, and obviously, people are liking you. And keep busy on social media. It's very cool, Chloe.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, take care, and well, we'll see you later in the year, I hope.
Yep, see you soon.
Hey, race fans, JB here. What is it about a race that's so exciting? The breakneck speeds, the constant pressure, the ever-present threat of danger? Or is it simply the driving? Think about it. There's no phones, no laptops, no screens, just the world's greatest drivers, cars, and the ultimate freedom. Yep, it's all of the above. Mobil1 for the love of driving. Visit loveofdriving.us/drive to win to learn more. Well, what a lovely conversation. What a great girl. And, all the same elements, the DNA that it takes to be a top racing driver, male, female, does not matter. If you've got the desire and that ambition and, of course, the raw talent, then the future is hopefully golden. So I hope you follow along as well. Chloe Chambers, everyone. That was very cool. Well, it's the summer break now. It is time for the Formula One circus to rest their tents, get out of their tents for a while and just enjoy the break. And I think I said it this time last year. Oh, to be a multi-millionaire young Formula One driver who doesn't get the chance to spend any of my money during the main season. So I better have a bloody good couple of weeks off. Expect to see some wild social media from all the drivers on their yachts and planes and boats everywhere and having a good time. Oh, if they're smart, they'll post nothing at all just because that's what a real vacation is about. It does present some issues in Formula One, though, especially if you look at like the Checo Perez situation. The reason everybody has to achieve so much in this next 5 days is, as of next Monday, it is tools down. You are forbidden from working in Formula One until the start of the week when they head to Zandvoort. So a lot of pressure. I personally believe, obviously, there's work going on at the factory, but all the principals and the engineers and everyone have to down tools. So let's hope that some big decisions are made, but also no decisions at all. I hope everyone makes the most of it. Logan Sargent, I do want to obviously make a quick mention of him at the end of this show. Logan's had a rough ride. We haven't been that easy on him some of the time. It's just a statement of fact, the way he's been performing. He's released from his Williams contract. James Fowles said he's done a great job for us. He's been a great guy, and we'll support him in every way we can, other than being in a Formula One car. Something tells me that Logan, when he's unburdened from the pressure of actually just being having such a poor run of performance, he might even have a good few races and he'll see the season out, which is a nice thing to do. He does, of course, bring some money into the seat, so he deserves to stay there till the end, I guess, while they muster their forces for an epic year next year with Carlos Sainz. That's it, guys. 14 races down, 10 to go. We'll be back in 3 weeks. It's the Dutch Grand Prix, one of my favorites. There's going to be that explosion of orange there in the Max Verstappen grandstand and Max Verstappen camping site. All that orange for the Dutch fan favorite could be also papaya orange if McLaren have their way. So I know that there's a lot of pressure that comes from being the home hero, but it also gives you wings, even more wings than Max Verstappen has. So we'll see how that plays out. Thank you to Chloe Chambers for being a part of it. Go and follow her on social media. She's a lovely girl with a great future. So even if it's not all the way to Formula One, we'll watch her win Le Mans. That'll be just as good. Big thanks to the Wynn Las Vegas for their support. Can't wait to be in the new studio in just a couple of weeks' time. And to Mobil1 for the love of driving. Take care, everyone. Enjoy. Well, how can you enjoy no Formula One for 3 weeks? But do whatever you do and do it well.
Thank you.